The winter encounter, the wind howled through the trees as Olivia Winters navigated her weathered Subaru along the winding mountain road. February in Montana was unforgiving, especially when an unexpected blizzard descended without warning. Road back to her remote cabin was becoming increasingly treacherous, visibility reduced to mere feet ahead of her headlights. Just 5 more miles, she muttered to herself, knuckles white against the steering wheel. As a wildlife photographer, Olivia was accustomed to harsh conditions. But tonight's storm was particularly vicious. A flash of movement caught her eye something dark against the blinding white. She squinted, slowing the car cautiously. There, struggling through knee-deep snow, was a figure hunched against the biting cold. Olivia pulled over, heart racing. Common sense warned against stopping for strangers on deserted roads, but whoever was out there wouldn't survive long in these temperatures. Rolling down her window just enough to call out, she shouted, "Hey, do you need help?" The figure turned up. Man, she could now see, wearing only a thin jacket completely inadequate for the conditions. His face was pale, lips taking on a bluish tinge. "My car, ... He gestured vaguely behind him, voice nearly lost in the wind. Slid off ... about a mile back. Without hesitation, Olivia leaned across and pushed open the passenger door. "Get in before you freeze to death." He stumbled toward her car, clutching a small duffel bag. As he collapsed into the passenger seat, Olivia cranked up the heat. "Thank you," he breathed, shivering violently. "I thought I might actually die out there." Under the interior light, Olivia could see him more clearly. He was perhaps in his early 30s, with dark hair dusted with snowflakes and several days' worth of stubble on his jaw. Despite his disheveled appearance, there was something refined about him, the way he held himself, perhaps, or the careful way he spoke. "I'm Olivia," she said, carefully steering back onto the road. "My cabin's not far. You can warm up there and figure out your next steps." "Daniel," he replied simply. "Daniel Reed, I appreciate this more than I can say." As they drove, Daniel remained quiet, offering only brief responses to her questions. "He'd been headed to Whitefish," he said, "just passing through." "No, he didn't. Have family nearby." His reticence might have seemed suspicious under different circumstances. But Olivia chalked it up to exhaustion and the shock of nearly freezing. When they finally reached her cabin, a modest but sturdy structure nestled among towering pines, the snow was falling so heavily that the world seemed to disappear beyond her porch light. "Come on," she said, grabbing her camera bag from the back seat. "Let's get you warmed up." Inside, Olivia quickly built up the fire in the stone hearth, while Daniel stood awkwardly near the door, still shivering. "Bathrooms through there." She pointed. "There's a hot shower, and I'll find you some dry clothes. They'll be big on you, but they're warm." "I don't want to impose," he began. "You're not imposing when the alternative is hypothermia," Olivia interrupted firmly. "Besides, no one's getting anywhere tonight in this storm." Something in Daniel's expression shifted relief, perhaps, or resignation. He nodded once, accepting her hospitality with quiet dignity. What Olivia couldn't know as she handed him a stack of flannel and wool was that Daniel Reed was actually Daniel Blackwood, heir to the Blackwood media empire. The duffel bag he clutched contained nothing but essential documents. A few changes of clothes and $50,000 in cash. Everything he'd grabbed before walking away from his suffocating life 3 weeks ago. As the hot water of the shower washed away the chill from his bones, Daniel closed his eyes. For the first time since his disappearance, he wondered if perhaps running hadn't been a mistake after all. Sanctuary in the storm morning arrived with an eerie silence. The world outside blanketed in 3 feet of fresh snow. Olivia woke early, as was her habit, and found Daniel already awake, staring out the front window at the transformed landscape. "Roads won't be cleared for days," she said, joining him with 2 steaming mugs of coffee. "Hope you're not in a hurry to get somewhere?" Daniel accepted the mug with a small smile. "Nowhere important." He was wearing the clothes she'd lent him, a faded flannel shirt and wool sweater that hung loosely on his frame. "Oh, I should repay your kindness somehow. I'm not completely helpless despite appearances." Over breakfast of oatmeal and dried berries, Olivia learned that Daniel was surprisingly capable. He spoke of growing up in Vermont, mentioning skills like chopping wood and basic repairs, though something in his telling seemed rehearsed, as though he were reciting facts rather than sharing memories. The generator sometimes struggles in weather like this, Olivia mentioned, watching him closely. Think you could take a look? By midday, Daniel had not only fixed the generator, but reinforced the woodshed roof where snow had begun to bow its structure. He worked methodically with the focus of someone grateful for physical tasks to occupy his mind. You're handy for someone who was dressed so impractically for a Montana winter, Olivia observed as they shared lunch. Daniel's smile didn't quite reach his eyes. Let's just say I wasn't thinking clearly when I started my trip. As days passed, they fell into an unexpectedly comfortable routine. Mornings were spent on necessary tasks, clearing paths around the cabin, managing supplies, ensuring the generator continued running. Afternoons, Olivia would sometimes retreat to her darkroom, developing photographs from her latest wildlife expedition. While Daniel read from her collection of well-worn books, evenings were spent by the fire, where conversation gradually deepened. Olivia spoke of her photography career, her choice to live remotely after years of chaotic city life. Daniel listened intently, asking thoughtful questions that revealed genuine interest rather than mere politeness. When speaking of himself, however, Daniel remained vague. He mentioned traveling extensively, working in communications, and recently needing a complete change. Olivia sensed there were oceans beneath these simple statements, but respected his privacy. Everyone had the right to their secrets. On the fifth night, as a particularly fierce wind rattled the windows, Daniel surprised her by cooking dinner, remarkably sophisticated pasta dish made from her simple pantry ingredients. Where does a drifter learn to cook like this? She asked, savoring the perfectly balanced flavors. A shadow crossed his face. My mother, he said after a pause. She believed everyone should know how to create something beautiful, even from the simplest ingredients. She sounds wonderful. Was the past tense hung between them, and Olivia didn't press further? Later that evening, as they sat before the fire, Daniel noticed a guitar case in the corner. Do you play? He asked badly. Olivia laughed. I keep meaning to practice more. When she nodded, Daniel retrieved the instrument and began tuning it with practiced ease. Soon, the cabin filled with the gentle melody of a song Olivia didn't recognize, something haunting and beautiful that seemed to perfectly capture the isolation of their snowbound sanctuary. What Olivia couldn't know was that Daniel had composed this piece himself. During lonely nights in his Manhattan penthouse, surrounded by luxury but devoid of connection. The song had never been recorded, never been heard by anyone else, one of the few things in his life that hadn't been commodified, marketed, or scrutinized by the board of directors that constantly pressured him to become the face of Blackwood. Media as the last notes faded, Olivia found herself blinking back unexpected tears. That was beautiful, she whispered. What's it called? Daniel set the guitar down gently. It doesn't have a name. It's just ... something I play sometimes. It should have a name, Olivia insisted. Everything that moves people should have a name. Their eyes met across the dimly lit room, and something shifted between them, a recognition, perhaps of kindred spirits despite their different paths. Sanctuary, Daniel said softly. It's called Sanctuary. Unspoken truths. By the 10th day, the main roads had been cleared enough for travel, but Daniel made no mention of leaving. Olivia found herself relieved each morning to find him still there. Brewing coffee or stoking the fire, they ventured outside more now. With Olivia showing Daniel her favorite photography spots, a frozen waterfall that glittered like diamonds in the sunlight, a ridge where elk gathered at dusk, a stand of aspen trees whose slender trunks created natural frames for the mountain. Vistas beyond, Daniel proved to be an attentive student when she explained photography techniques, absorbing information with an intensity that suggested he rarely allowed himself to be a beginner at anything. His questions were astute sometimes, surprising her with their technical insight. How do you know so much about focal lengths? She asked one afternoon, as they trudged back to the cabin, cameras in hand. Read a lot, he replied with that now familiar deflection. Then, after a moment, he added, and I've been photographed. More than I care to remember. The comment hung in the air between them, another breadcrumb from his mysterious past. Olivia catalogued it alongside other inconsistencies she'd noticed. The calluses on his hands didn't match his story of office. Work. His duffel contained a single designer sweater that probably cost more than her monthly expenses. He occasionally used phrases that betrayed an elite education he never mentioned. One evening, they prepared dinner together, moving around her. Small kitchen with the synchronized ease of much longer acquaintances. Olivia's satellite phone rang. It was her agent, calling about an upcoming exhibition in Seattle. Want the Predators at Dawn series. Her agent explained excitedly. And the Times art critic confirmed she'll be covering it. After the call, Olivia explained the opportunity to Daniel, pulling out portfolios to show him the work that would be featured. As she spread photographs across the table, Daniel's expression changed when he came to one particular image, a stark black and white shot of a wolf pack in mourning. Mist. This is extraordinary, he said quietly, studying it with unusual intensity. The composition, the timing. This belongs in major galleries. It will be, Olivia replied. That's what the exhibition is about. Daniel looked up, something like recognition flickering in his eyes. Have you ever shown at the Hanover Gallery in New York? Olivia laughed. The Hanover? No way. That's Major League. They represent artists with global reputations. They would take this, Daniel said, with such certainty that Olivia tilted her head, studying him. And how would you know that? Daniel seemed to catch himself, carefully placing the photograph down. Just an observation. Your work deserves wider recognition. Later that night, while Olivia slept, Daniel sat at her small desk with a borrowed notepad. He wrote a letter carefully worded, signed only with his first initial, and sealed it in an envelope addressed to Eleanor Blackwood, his sister and the only family member he still trusted. Enclosed was a memory card containing copies of Olivia's best work, along with instructions that mentioned the Hanover Gallery, which the Blackwood family happened to own. Daniel had no intention of using his family's influence to help Olivia. It would be a betrayal of the authenticity that drew him to her, but Eleanor would recognize the quality of the work on its own merits. His sister had always been the family's true artistic conscience. What Daniel didn't realize was that Olivia, awakened by a noise, had seen him from the darkened hallway, watching as he carefully tucked something into his duffel bag. The secrecy stirred her first real doubts about the man who had become so unexpectedly central to her life. Revelations and departures. The news broke on a Tuesday morning, nearly 3 weeks after the snowstorm. Olivia's satellite internet connection, finally restored after the blizzard, delivered the headlines that changed everything. Blackwood heir, still missing, $2 million reward offered for information. The article featured a photograph of Daniel clean-shaven, hair perfectly styled, dressed in an impeccable suit, standing beside his father at some charity gala. The resemblance to her houseguest was undeniable. Despite his current rugged appearance, Daniel Blackwood, 34, had apparently disappeared 3 weeks earlier. Shortly after a very public argument with his father about the future direction of their global media company. His car had been found abandoned in Chicago, sparking fears of kidnapping until security footage showed him boarding a bus west. The family's private investigators had traced him as far as Bozeman before losing the trail. Olivia sat staring at her laptop screen, a cold feeling spreading through her chest. Not because he was wealthy, as she cared little for that, but because everything between them had been built on a foundation of lies. When Daniel returned from splitting wood, he found her waiting, the laptop open on the kitchen table. Daniel Blackwood, she said simply, turning the screen toward him. Heir to a media empire? Not exactly the drifter story you've been selling, says drained of color. Olivia, I can explain. Can you? Shh. Because I've been trying to figure out which parts were real. Was any of it true? Vermont, your mother. Or was it all just a convenient fiction? Most of it was true, he said quietly, making no move to approach her. Just ... adapted. I did grow up in Vermont, but on an estate, not a farm. My mother did. Teach me to cook, but alongside our private chef. She did die cancer 5 years ago. And what about us? Was I just a convenient shelter from your real life? Some kind of poverty tourism while you figured out your next move? The hurt in her voice seemed to physically pain him. No, God, no. These weeks have been the most honest of my life. Honest. She laughed bitterly. That's an interesting word choice. I didn't lie about who I am, Olivia. Just what I was born into. He ran a hand through his hair in frustration. My whole life has been predetermined: which schools, which positions in the company, which social circles. Even my relationships get dissected by the board for their PR value. He gestured around her modest cabin. This talking to you? Helping with real work? Being valued for what I can do rather than what I own? This is the first time I've felt like a person instead of a portfolio. Olivia wanted to understand, but the betrayal cut deep. Should have told me. When? He challenged. The first night, when you might have turned me in for the reward, a week in, when it would have seemed like I was using you. Or later, when I realized I was falling in love with you and was terrified of ruining it. The word love hung between them, but Olivia wasn't ready to address it. What happens now? She asked instead. Your family thinks you've been kidnapped. There are probably people searching everywhere. Daniel's expression hardened. I left a letter they know I wasn't taken. This kidnapping narrative is my father's way of saving face better, a victim than a rebel in the Blackwood family. He approached the table slowly, closing the laptop. I need to go back and deal with this properly. Set terms for my involvement in the company. Establish boundaries. Of course, Olivia said, her voice carefully neutral. Your life is waiting. That's just it, Daniel said, his eyes holding hers. Until I met you, I didn't have a life. I had an obligation. He left the next morning. Olivia drove him to the nearest car rental agency. Their conversation during the hour-long trip restricted to safe topics. The weather, road conditions, her upcoming exhibition. Neither mentioned the possibility of future contact as he stepped out of her car. Daniel hesitated. What I said yesterday about falling in love with you, that wasn't a strategy or a lie. Olivia gripped the steering wheel tightly. It doesn't matter. We live in different worlds. No, he said firmly. We don't. Not anymore. But as she drove away, watching his figure recede in her rearview mirror, Olivia couldn't imagine how that could possibly be true. Finding the way back, spring came to Montana, transforming the snow-covered landscape into a riot of wildflowers and new growth. Olivia threw herself into her work, spending weeks in the field photographing the seasonal awakening of the wilderness. Exhibition in Seattle had been a remarkable success, with 3 pieces acquired by a prominent museum. More surprising was the invitation that arrived from the prestigious Hanover Gallery in New York, expressing interest in hosting a solo exhibition of her work. Olivia suspected Daniel's influence, but could find no evidence of it. The gallery director, during their initial video call, spoke knowledgeably about her photography techniques and themes, clearly familiar with her entire portfolio beyond just the submitted samples. Against her better judgment, Olivia accepted the invitation. The exhibition was scheduled for June, a time when New York would be humming with cultural energy. The night of the opening, Olivia stood in the gleaming gallery space, surrounded by her photographs displayed with stunning precision. Collectors, critics, and art enthusiasts moved through the rooms, their murmured conversations punctuated occasionally by laughter or exclamations of appreciation. She had deliberately not asked the gallery if Daniel Blackwood would attend. Throughout the evening, she found herself scanning the crowd, simultaneously hoping for and dreading his appearance. It was nearly closing time when a commotion near the entrance drew her attention. Not Daniel, but a woman who shared his striking features, tall, elegant, with the same intense gaze and tard. The gallery director hurried over. Ms. Winters, may I introduce Eleanor Blackwood, one of our board members and a passionate photography collector. Eleanor's handshake was firm. Your work is exceptional, Ms. Winters, particularly your use of natural light as a narrative element. Thank you, Olivia replied cautiously. I'm surprised by your specific observation. Most people comment on the subjects rather than the technique. A smile played at Eleanor's lips. He mentioned your mastery. of dawn light. So Daniel had spoken of her. The knowledge sent an unwelcome flutter through Olivia's chest. "Your brother isn't here tonight?" she asked, aiming for casual indifference. Daniel sends his regrets. He's actually in Montana. Montana? Olivia repeated, her composure slipping. Eleanor's expression softened. "He's been making some significant changes. Perhaps you should ask him yourself." She handed Olivia a business card with an address handwritten on the back, an address Olivia recognized as being in Whitefish. Less than 2 hours from her cabin, 2 days later, having cut short her New York trip, Olivia found herself driving. Along a familiar mountain road, the address led not to some luxury retreat, as she had half expected, but to a modest workshop on the outskirts of town. A hand-painted sign read Blackwood Furniture and Restoration. Inside, she found Daniel Sanding. A beautifully crafted table. He wore simple work clothes, a layer of fine sawdust covering his arms. He looked up as the bell above the door announced her arrival, and for a moment neither spoke. "Your exhibition was a success," he finally said, setting his tools down. "Eleanor said your work was the finest the gallery has shown in years." "Did you arrange it?" Olivia asked directly. "No," Daniel replied with equal directness. "I asked Eleanor to look at your portfolio, nothing more. She's the gallery's artistic director." The decision was entirely hers. Olivia glanced around the workshop at the half-finished pieces, the carefully organized tools, the sketches pinned to a corkboard. "So this is where you disappeared to?" Daniel nodded.
Ow.
"I went back to New York, faced my family, negotiated terms for my continued involvement with the company strictly as a silent board member. Then I came here and bought this place." "Why?" "My grandfather was a carpenter before he founded the company. He taught me woodworking when I was young. It was the only time I felt ... peaceful." Daniel ran his hand along the edge of the table. "I needed to build something real with my hands, something that wasn't about power or appearances in Montana," Olivia asked, the question that really mattered hanging unspoken between them. Daniel met her gaze steadily. "I came back to the place where I finally found myself. And to be near you if you'd allow it." He gestured to a completed rocking chair in the corner.
Ow.
"I've been working on that for months. It's designed for a photographer with a wider seat for sitting sideways to sort through images and arms positioned to rest a camera without strain." Olivia approached the chair, running her fingers over the polished wood. The craftsmanship was exquisite, every joint and curve speaking of patience and care. "You made this for me? Before you even knew if I'd speak to you again?" "I made it because I love you," Daniel said simply. "Whether or not you could forgive me, I needed to create something that honored what you gave me the chance to be seen. For myself." Olivia sat in the chair, feeling how perfectly it accommodated her form. "It's beautiful," she admitted. "What?" "But a chair doesn't fix everything. I know." Daniel remained where he was, respecting her space. "I'm not offering you luxury, or rescue, or some fairy tale. I'm offering partnership, my real self, building a real life. I have a small cabin about 10 minutes from here. It needs work, but the light is good for a darkroom." Despite herself, Olivia smiled. "You've thought this through." "I've had time," he replied. While building furniture and imagining you sitting in it, Olivia rocked gently in the chair, considering. The man before her was neither the mysterious drifter from the Snowstorm, nor the reluctant heir from the news stories. He was something else entirely, someone forging a new path, as she had done years earlier. "I require absolute honesty," she said finally, "even when it's difficult." "Always," he promised. "And I won't live in your world. I need the mountains, the solitude." "It's my world too now," Daniel said. "The one I chose." Olivia stood from the rocking chair and crossed the room to where he waited. Up close she could see new lines around. His eyes evidence of decisions made and challenges faced. "We'll need to take this slowly," she said. "Get to know each other without secrets or storms." Daniel nodded, hope lighting his features. "I'd like that." Outside, the Montana summer sun illuminated the workshop in a warm glow that reminded Olivia of that first evening by her fireplace, when a stranger had played a nameless song that he'd called Sanctuary. They had both been seeking refuge then. Perhaps now they could build something more lasting together on equal ground.